This week is combining chapter 7 and 9, and it's dealing with what we're calling social categories. And there are three basic social categories that we're dealing with this week. One is the social class, the second is race, and the third is ethnicity. And these are some of the categories that we don't pay very close attention to, especially not in this part of the world. So we need to be extremely mindful of them, as well as gender. And here I need to make a distinction between gender and sex. Okay, as you already know, sex is biological, gender is socially constructed, and we're going to see that similar to race, gender is also a socially constructed category. So we very unfortunately, life is not that pleasant for some people. So the idea of the main thing that I want you to take away from this chapter is the idea of life chance. That is what we're born into. That is the resources that we have access to: the clothes, the shelters, and the education and healthcare. And I think we are extremely lucky in this country that we have life chance, very good life chance. So you are born into wealth, you are born into a stable country, and that's a life of its own. Also, there is the idea of income, which is the money you're making, and basically the wage, the salaries, but also including government's aid. And with that comes the idea of social stratification. That is the hierarchy of people. So there are some people on top, there are some people in the middle, and other people at the bottom. With that comes the idea of social mobility. For those of us who are born at the bottom, we have the ability of social mobility, that is moving from the bottom to the top. And with that comes the idea of intergenerational and intragenerational. Intergenerational, that is moving from one generation to the next. Intrageneration is within the same generation. The idea of social categories comes the idea of life chances, and then social stratification and social mobility. And very unfortunately, with social categories, there are some people who are extremely unlucky in their lives. So imagine yourself born into either slavery or caste system. So slavery is well known, right? So we know what slavery is. The caste system is the system whereby groups are just cursed to stay in one social class or in at the bottom. We have this exceptionally pronounced in places like India. So the idea of social class is basically dependent on how much money you have, the idea of the ownership, the idea of resources that people actually have. So the social class is, and we're going to have about 7 or 6 categories of social classes. But for now, I want you to just know that there is social stratification. So it's a type of those who are born at the bottom, those who are born in the middle, and those who are born extremely rich. And so with the social class comes the idea of stratification, ownership, and control of resources. And here we have, as far as Marx, for example, is concerned, there is the capitalist class, and then there is working class. So the capitalist class are the people who have money, what he calls the bourgeoisie. The working class are the proletariat, or those who work for wages. And as a result, we have what Marx would call class conflict. So capitalist class versus working class. So there are about maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 7 social classes or social or class stratification. We have the upper class; those are extremely rich. Lower upper class and upper middle class, and then we have middle class, and then we have working class, working poor, and underclass. Upper class is clear, right? So those are just way up there. Lower upper class are just a little bit lower than upper class, but they're not just upper middle class. They tend to be in between. Middle class are people who are extremely comfortable, not extremely, but they are comfortable in their lives. Working class are people who work for wages. It's, as the expression goes, from paycheck to paycheck. Working poor are those who are working yet they can't meet their rent or basic needs. So those are known as working poor. And the underclass are people who they can be working, but they simply don't make enough money to survive or strive in life. So that's for social class. The big category that I need you to be mindful of out of this course is the idea of race. Similar to gender, which is socially and historically constructed category, race is also socially and historically constructed category. It is not biological. In other words, white people are not, it's not a biology, and black people, Middle Easterns, Asians, and so on, these are not biological categories because 99.9% of all genes are the same. So what we are having are visible characteristics that people use, including skin color, hair, eye shade, and subjectively selected attributes. And what most people do is they use these visible criteria or characteristics to classify people. We need to remember that race is not natural. Race is actually something that was created by someone whose name is Carlos Linnaeus, and he was a botany person, and then who started to do the same classification that he used to do for plants on human, and as a result we ended up with race as we know it now. And what is really interesting about race is that it is not only not natural, but not easily definable. So you may have someone that you cannot classify according to the classification of race. So we need to know a couple of things. One, race is a socially constructed category. In other words, it's an invented category, something that we created. Two, it is not biology. Three, race is singled out, or some races are singled out, not for just biological, because biology doesn't exist, classification, but is for resource allocation. So those who are classified as higher ranking race, they tend to access more resources, and that's how it works. So race is not biology. Race is about power. Very, very significant to note this. Same thing with gender. The classification of gender is not biology. It is to access resources and access power. So this is a really, really interesting thing to think about. And people use visible criteria to allocate resources and use those as a way to classify people. We tend to confuse race and ethnicity, especially in North America. Ethnicity